Hi, welcome to Health Heart. Our community is more than 35,000 subscribers. Thank you. Enjoy my new story.
My mother sold my condo while I was lying unconscious on an operating table with my spine cut open. She pocketed $195,000, and by the time I woke up, $142,000 of it was already gone, spent on my little sister's wedding. I found out through a voicemail. Not even a phone call, a voicemail. And the worst part? My mom left it in the same sweet voice she uses to remind me to take my vitamins. My name is Madeline Walton. Most people call me Maddie. I'm 31 years old and I work as a veterinary technician at Palmetto Animal Hospital in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm the person who holds your nervous golden retriever while the vet gives the shots. I make decent money, nothing spectacular. I drive a 2016 Kia Sorento with a bumper sticker that says, "My dog is smarter than your honor student," and until very recently, I owned a 2-bedroom condo at Laurel Ridge Condominiums on Pelham Road. That condo was my whole life. I didn't buy it with some trust fund or a lucky break. My grandmother, Beverly Walton, left it to me when she passed 3 years ago. Grandma Beverly owned it outright. No mortgage, no liens, no debt. She also left me $22,000 in cash. My younger sister, Paige, got the same amount, $22,000. My mother, Gail, got nothing. And that wasn't an accident. See, Beverly knew her daughter-in-law. She loved Gail in the way you love someone you don't trust with a credit card. Beverly's will was specific. She left the condo to me because she believed I'd take care of it. She didn't leave property to Gail because, in Beverly's words, written right there in the will for everyone to read, she had concerns about Gail's financial judgment. That's polite legal language for "this woman will sell the furniture before the funeral flowers wilt." Paige blew through her $22,000 in 4 months. Clothes, a vacation to Cabo, a deposit on a BMW lease she couldn't keep up with. Nobody was surprised. My mother was furious. Not at Paige for wasting the money, but at Beverly for not leaving more. That's how things worked in my family. Paige could do no wrong, and the rest of us existed to make sure she didn't have to face consequences. I used my inheritance wisely. I renovated the kitchen, new countertops, a proper backsplash, fixed the garbage disposal that had been making a sound like a dying robot since 2014. I paid the property taxes, built an emergency fund, and lived within my means. That condo was the only real security I had in this world, and I treated it like it mattered, because it did. Now, let me tell you about the surgery. For 2 years, I'd been dealing with a degenerative disc in my lower back, L4 to L5 for anyone who speaks spine. It started as occasional stiffness, then became pain that woke me up at 3 in the morning, then became the kind of pain where you cry in the shower because standing up feels like someone's twisting a screwdriver between your vertebrae. My orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Mehta, at Prisma Health Greenville Memorial, told me I needed a spinal fusion, 7 hours on the table, general anesthesia, titanium screws, 6 to 8 weeks of recovery, real risks, nerve damage, infection, the usual terrifying list they hand you on a clipboard. I was scared, genuinely deeply scared. The kind of scared where you clean your apartment the night before because some irrational part of your brain whispers, "What if you don't come home?" The morning of the surgery, I was already in my hospital gown, sitting on the edge of that narrow bed with the paper sheet, waiting for the anesthesiologist. They'd given me midazolam. That's the sedative they use before they wheel you in. It makes you feel like your brain is wrapped in cotton. You can talk, you can sign your name, but your judgment is basically on vacation. That's when my mother showed up. Gail walked in with a travel mug of chamomile tea, my favorite, and a warm smile. She rubbed my shoulder and told me everything was going to be fine. Then she pulled out a small stack of papers. She said the nurse mentioned I should sign some medical forms just in case. A power of attorney so she could communicate with my doctors if anything went sideways during surgery. It sounded reasonable. I was about to be unconscious for 7 hours. Someone should be able to talk to my medical team. So I signed. My hands were shaky. My vision was a little soft around the edges, and the only thing I could really focus on was the fear of what was about to happen to my spine. I didn't read every page. I trusted my mother. What I signed was not a medical power of attorney. It was a general durable power of attorney, a document that gave Gail full authority over my finances, my property, my bank accounts, everything. I signed my home away because I was drugged, terrified, and I believed the one person who should have been protecting me. 7 hours later, I woke up. My throat was raw from the breathing tube. My back felt like it had been rebuilt with hardware from a construction site, which, technically, it had. My vision was blurry. My mouth was so dry I could have used my tongue as sandpaper. And there on the little rolling tray next to my hospital bed was my phone. 68 missed calls. 41 from my mother, 19 from Paige, 8 from numbers I didn't recognize. The morphine was doing its job on the surgical pain, but there's no dosage on earth for what I heard next. One voicemail from Gail, her voice cheerful, casual, like she was reminding me to pick up milk on the way home. Maddie, honey, don't be upset, but we sold the condo. You were unconscious, so we signed the paperwork for you. It's for Paige's wedding. We'll explain everything when you're feeling better. Love you, sweetie. I played it twice because my brain couldn't process it the first time. Then I saw a text from a number I didn't know. Hi, confirming the walkthrough for the new buyer tomorrow at 10 a.m. Can you leave the keys under the mat? I was lying in a hospital bed. I couldn't sit up. I couldn't turn my head without feeling like my spine would snap in half. I had titanium screws holding my vertebrae together, and my mother had just sold my home. My grandmother's gift, my security, my independence, every single thing I'd built for $195,000 to pay for my sister's wedding. The tears came, and because I couldn't turn my head, they just rolled sideways into my ears. You know that feeling when your phone is blowing up and you know something terrible has happened before you even look? Multiply that by 1,000. That was my Tuesday evening at Prisma Health Greenville Memorial. But here's the thing about hitting absolute bottom while you're flat on your back in a hospital bed. There's a strange clarity that comes with it. When everything has been taken from you and you physically cannot move, your mind gets very, very focused. I picked up my phone, slowly. My hands were still trembling from the anesthesia. I made one call, not to my mother, not to Paige. I called my best friend, Josie Callahan. Josie and I had been close since our junior year at Clemson. She now worked as a senior paralegal at a real estate law firm in downtown Greenville. She picked up on the second ring. I whispered 4 words. My mom sold my condo. Josie said she'd be there in 30 minutes. She made it in 26. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one, and it means more to me than you know. Thank you. Now, where were we? Right. Josie Callahan walking into my hospital room like a woman who had already mentally filed 3 lawsuits before she found parking. Josie took one look at me, pale, hooked to a morphine drip, whispering because the intubation tube had turned my voice into something between a whisper and a squeaky door, and sat down without saying a word. I handed her my phone. She listened to the voicemail. She read the texts. She scrolled through the 68 missed calls, and I watched her face go through about 9 different expressions in 30 seconds, none of them good. Josie is a paralegal at Ostrowski and Fay, one of the top real estate law firms in Greenville. She spent 7 years reviewing property closings, title disputes, and deed transfers. So when she looked up from my phone and said very quietly that this wasn't a family disagreement, this was a felony, I believed her. She started taking photos. Every screen, every text, every call log. She photographed the voicemail transcript. She was building a file before I even finished explaining what happened. That's Josie. While most people say, oh my God, I'm so sorry, Josie builds evidence folders. I love that woman. The next morning, I called my mother. Gail answered on the first ring, cheerful as a weather lady on a sunny Monday. She talked about the wedding like it was the most natural thing in the world. In her telling, what she'd done wasn't theft. It was family management. She told me the condo was just walls and a roof and that I could stay with her until I found something new. She said family comes first. And then she said the line that cut deeper than anything. Beverly would have wanted this. Beverly. And my grandmother, who specifically, in writing, did not trust Gail with property. That Beverly would have wanted Gail to sell the condo Beverly deliberately left to me. The logic was so twisted, it could have qualified for a pretzel franchise. But Gail believed it. That's the part that's hard to explain to people who've never dealt with someone like my mother. She wasn't lying to manipulate me. She genuinely, truly, in her heart, believed she had the right to make this decision. In Gail's world, she is the family. She decides what's fair, what's needed, and who sacrifices for whom. And the person who sacrifices has always been me. Here's where the numbers get painful. Gail had sold the condo to a cash buyer for $195,000. The money went into a bank account she'd set up, not in my name and hers. And in the approximately 19 hours between the closing and my waking up, she'd already committed $142,000 to Paige's wedding, $68,000 for the deposit at the Westin Poinsett in downtown Greenville, the venue Paige had been dreaming about since she saw it on some bridal Instagram page, $31,000 to a wedding planner named Renata, who apparently charges more per hour than my orthopedic surgeon, $18,000 for a custom designer wedding dress because off the rack wasn't good enough for my sister, who once returned a birthday gift from me because the ribbon was the wrong shade of teal, and $25,000 to a caterer for a menu that, I later learned, included a raw bar with imported oysters. $210,000. That was the total budget for this wedding. My entire condo. The thing my grandmother left me, the thing I'd spent 3 years maintaining and improving, cost less than Paige's reception. At least my condo came with working plumbing and didn't require a string quartet. The remaining $53,000 was earmarked for a 2-week honeymoon in Santorini and the rest of the vendor payments, all from the sale of my home, all authorized by a power of attorney I signed while sedated and terrified before spine surgery. But wait. It got worse. Gail didn't just sell the condo that day. She also went to my bank, the same day, same afternoon, between the notary's office and the hospital, and withdrew $3,800 from my personal savings account, using the same power of attorney, the florist deposit for the wedding. My mother went from stealing my home to emptying my savings to sitting at my bedside like a loving parent, all in one afternoon. That takes a level of compartmentalization I can't even comprehend. Then came the text from Paige, my little sister. 27 years old, hasn't held a job for longer than 5 months in her life, blew through her inheritance in one summer, didn't text me to ask if I survived a 7-hour surgery, didn't ask how I was feeling, didn't say, I hope you're okay. She sent me a message that said I shouldn't make this about me because this was her special day and that I could be her maid of honor to make up for it. She wanted me to stand in a blush pink dress at a wedding funded by my stolen home and smile for the photographer. I don't know what's more impressive, the audacity or the complete absence of self-awareness. Actually, I do know it's the audacity. And then I discovered something that made my blood go cold. I checked my hospital file. Josie helped me access it. Gail had listed herself as my emergency contact. Fine, that happens. But Gail had also been making decisions about my post-surgical care. She had contacted the hospital's discharge planning team and requested I be transferred to a cheaper rehabilitation facility, a place 40 minutes outside Greenville with mediocre reviews, to save on costs. Whose costs? She just pocketed $195,000 of my money, and she was trying to cut corners on my recovery. Josie helped me revoke Gail's access immediately. Every form, every authorization, everything. My mother's name was removed from every document at that hospital by 9 p.m. that night. I checked my bank accounts. Savings, wiped. Checking. $1,847. That was it. My entire financial existence. I had a $6,200 hospital copay coming. No income for 6 to 8 weeks of recovery, and I couldn't stand up without help. My mother had taken my home, my savings, my medical autonomy, and my ability to recover in peace. And she wanted me to wear blush pink and be grateful. Josie sat with me until midnight. Before she left, she said 5 words that I held onto like a lifeline. Don't call them. Don't text. Don't warn them about anything. Let me talk to Warren tomorrow morning. Warren was her boss. a real estate attorney with 32 years of experience. I lay there in the dark, listening to the beeping of hospital machines and the shuffle of night nurses in the hallway, and that's when the last piece clicked into place. Something I hadn't let myself see until that moment. 3 weeks before my surgery, Gail had started calling me almost daily, not to ask about my health, to push me to schedule the operation. "Don't wait, honey. Your health is the most important thing. Dr. Maida's office has an opening on the 14th. Take it." She was unusually insistent. At the time, I thought she was being caring for once. She wasn't being caring. She was setting a date. The buyer, the notary, the paperwork. She'd had all of it ready for weeks. She just needed me unconscious, and she pushed me toward the operating table to make it happen. My mother didn't just steal from me during my surgery. She engineered the timing of my surgery to steal from me. The wedding was in 13 days. I could barely whisper, but behind my silence, something was building that Gail Walton never planned for. I didn't sleep that night, partly because of the pain. Turns out titanium screws in your spine don't care about your emotional state. And partly because my brain wouldn't stop running the math on how thoroughly my own family had betrayed me. But also partly because the man in the room next to mine was snoring so loud I thought the wall was vibrating. Hospitals are many things. Quiet is not one of them. At 7:14 the next morning, Josie texted me, "Talk to Warren. He wants to help. Pro bono, he says this is textbook." 3 words. Pro bono, textbook, help. I read that text 6 times and cried for the 7th time in 12 hours. But this time, it was different. This time it felt like the first crack of daylight after the longest night of my life. Warren Ostrowski was 61 years old, a senior partner at Ostrowski & Fay, and he'd spent 32 years practicing real estate law in South Carolina. The man had seen every kind of property dispute, title fraud, and deed scam that exists. But this case was personal for him. His own mother had been financially exploited by his uncle years ago, a family situation that ended in court and permanently changed how Warren viewed trust within families. When Josie brought him my case, he didn't hesitate. Warren reviewed the documents Josie had photographed at my bedside. The POA, the texts, the voicemail transcript, the bank withdrawal confirmation, and within 2 hours he'd identified 5 critical legal problems with what my mother had done. 1. The power of attorney was obtained through deception. I was under sedation, believed I was signing medical forms, and was never told I was granting financial authority over my property. That's textbook fraud under South Carolina law. 2. Gail used the POA for a transaction that directly benefited herself and her other daughter. An agent under a power of attorney has a fiduciary duty to act in the principal's interest, not their own. Gail violated that duty so thoroughly she might as well have set it on fire. 3. Harold Fenn, the notary who handled the closing notarized documents that I never personally appeared for. Under South Carolina notary law, that's a violation that can void the entire closing. Harold was a 67-year-old semi-retired notary Gail found through a church friend. He'd handled the deal for $220, roughly 4 times the standard closing fee. He didn't verify my identity. He didn't call me. He didn't confirm the POA was legitimately obtained. He took the inflated paycheck, skipped every safeguard, and rubber-stamped a theft. 4. The sale price. My condo was appraised at $238,000 14 months before the surgery. Gail sold it for $195,000, $43,000 below market value, because she needed a fast cash buyer and she didn't care about getting fair price. It wasn't her money to lose. And 5, this was the one that changed everything. Warren discovered that Gail hadn't just used the POA to sign the closing documents. She had also created a separate document, a handwritten consent letter, supposedly from me, addressed to the buyer, confirming that I authorized the sale and was aware of the terms. My signature was on the bottom. I never wrote that letter. I never saw that letter. My mother forged it. This wasn't just POA abuse anymore. Under South Carolina law, forging a written instrument to facilitate a property transfer is forgery in the first degree. That's a felony carrying up to 10 years. Gail thought she was being thorough, covering her tracks with extra documentation. Instead, she manufactured the single most damning piece of evidence against herself. I almost felt something close to admiration for the irony. Almost. Warren's next call was to the title company that handled the closing. And here's where I learned that even corporations can accidentally become your allies when their money is on the line. The title company had flagged the transaction internally as unusual. The speed, the POA, the below-market price all raised eyebrows, but Harold Fenn had pushed it through, insisting everything was authorized. The title insurance company realized they were potentially liable for the entire transaction if the sale was fraudulent. Suddenly, they were very interested in helping void the sale. Nothing motivates a corporation faster than the possibility of writing a large check. Then Warren called the buyer. Glenn Sheehan was a 44-year-old real estate investor from Columbia, South Carolina. He'd paid $195,000 in cash for what he believed was a straightforward deal. A woman selling her condo quickly through a family representative. Glenn was no fool, but Gail had been convincing. She told Glenn I was relocating for a new job and wanted a fast, clean sale. Glenn was furious. Not at me, at Gail. His $195,000 was now trapped in a legally questionable transaction, and he'd been lied to from the start. He was ready to cooperate with anything and everything. And then Glenn told Warren something that stopped everyone cold. Gail had first contacted Glenn 3 weeks before my surgery. Not 1 week, not a few days, 3 full weeks. She had the property listing, the asking price, and the proposed closing date already mapped out. The closing date she'd given Glenn was the exact date of my operation. She had that date before I'd even confirmed it with the hospital. My mother hadn't just taken advantage of my surgery. She had arranged the entire deal in advance and then pushed me to schedule the surgery on a date that worked for her closing timeline. Every phone call, "Don't wait, honey, your health comes first. Take the appointment on the 14th, was part of the plan. She used my medical fear, my trust, and my sedated state as tools in a real estate transaction she'd been engineering for nearly a month. I thought I'd already felt the worst of it. I was wrong. This was worse, because the woman who handed me chamomile tea before surgery and rubbed my shoulder and told me everything would be fine, that woman had already sold my home on paper. She was just waiting for me to go under so she could sign the last page. Then I got a phone call that made me laugh for the first time in days. My neighbor, Donna Litvak, 64 years old, retired postal worker, lived next door to me at Laurel Ridge for the past 3 years. Donna checks her Ring doorbell camera more often than most people check their blood pressure. The woman could run surveillance for the FBI and still have energy to bring you banana bread afterward. Donna called because a man had shown up at the condo with a measuring tape and started talking about gutting my kitchen, the one I'd personally renovated, the one with the new countertops. Donna had no idea I was selling because I wasn't selling, but she didn't know that yet. When I told her what happened, Donna went quiet for about 5 seconds. Then she said she had her Ring footage from the day of my surgery. Time-stamped video showing my mother entering my condo with Harold Fenn and a man she didn't recognize. That was Glenn Sheehan, while I was on an operating table having my spine rebuilt. Gail walked into my home, my grandmother's home, with a notary and a buyer, and sold it while I was unconscious. Donna said she'd testify to anything. She also pointed out something important. She had never seen me pack a single box, never seen movers, never heard me mention selling, because I hadn't. Her testimony would confirm that this sale happened without my knowledge or participation. By the end of that day, I had a veteran real estate attorney working pro bono, a title insurance company eager to cooperate, a buyer ready to testify, a neighbor with time-stamped video evidence, and a notary who'd cut every corner for a $2,200 payday. The pieces were falling into place faster than Gail had spent the money. Warren laid out the next steps: an emergency petition to void the sale, a Ellis Pendens to freeze the property, and a criminal report to the sheriff's office. I made my second important phone call that evening to the Greenville County Sheriff's Office and filed a report for forgery, fraud, and financial exploitation. 11 days until the wedding. Gail was picking out tablecloths. She had no idea that the ground beneath her was already crumbling. day 3 after surgery. I was moved out of the ICU and into a regular recovery room, which in hospital terms meant I graduated from, "We're really worried about you," to, "You're probably fine, but we're keeping you just in case." I could sit up slightly. I could whisper without feeling like my throat was lined with sandpaper, and I could hold my phone long enough to read the updates Warren Ostrowski was sending through Josie. The legal machine was moving, and it was moving fast. Warren operated on 2 separate tracks, civil and criminal, and he explained the difference to me like this. The civil track was the scalpel, precise and immediate, designed to stop the bleeding and get my property back. The criminal track was the slow wait, the kind of pressure that builds over weeks and months until it crushes everything beneath it. We needed both. On the civil side, Warren filed an emergency petition with the Greenville County Court to void the property sale on grounds of fraud, forgery, and breach of fiduciary duty. He filed a lis pendens, that's a legal notice attached to the property that tells the entire world this condo is in dispute, and nobody can buy it, sell it, or transfer it until a court says otherwise. It's like putting a padlock on a deed. Within 48 hours, the court issued a temporary restraining order freezing the entire transaction. My condo wasn't going anywhere. On the criminal side, the Greenville County Sheriff's Office opened a formal investigation based on the report I'd filed. Their first interview was with Harold Fenn, the notary, and Harold folded like a lawn chair in a windstorm. Harold was 67, semi-retired, and absolutely not prepared for a detective sitting across from him asking about felony fraud charges. He admitted everything within the first 20 minutes. He confirmed that Gail paid him $2,200 for the closing, about 4 times the normal fee, specifically because she needed it done fast and quiet. He admitted he never contacted me, never verified my identity, never confirmed the POA was legitimately obtained. He said Gail told him I was in the hospital but had authorized everything, and he took her word for it because the money was good. Harold wasn't evil. He was lazy and greedy, which in legal terms can be just as destructive. He was now facing his own charges, and he was more than willing to say whatever the prosecution needed to hear about Gail Walton. Meanwhile, Glenn Sheeham, the buyer, was cooperating fully with Warren's civil case. Glenn had already hired his own attorney and filed a separate lawsuit against Gail for the return of his $195,000. My mother was now being sued from 2 directions simultaneously, and she didn't even know it yet. But Glenn gave us something more valuable than his cooperation. He gave us a timeline. During one of his conversations with Warren, Glenn mentioned that Gail had proposed the closing date to him 3 weeks before the surgery. Warren asked him to check his records. Glenn pulled up his emails and found the original message from Gail, dated 21 days before my operation, with the property address, the asking price, and a specific closing date that matched my surgery date exactly. Warren took that email, cross-referenced it with my hospital records, and confirmed something I had suspected but couldn't prove. Gail had the closing date before I'd even confirmed my surgery. She called Dr. Mehta's scheduling office, found out the available dates, then contacted Glenn with a closing date that matched. After that, she spent 2 weeks calling me, pushing me to take the appointment. "Don't wait, Maddie. Your health comes first. The 14th works. Just take it." She didn't schedule her fraud around my surgery. She scheduled my surgery around her fraud. When Warren told me this, I was sitting in my hospital bed eating lime jello, which, by the way, tastes exactly the way you'd expect something that color to taste. And I just set the spoon down and stared at the wall for about 3 minutes. There are levels of betrayal. Finding out your mother stole your home is one level. Finding out she orchestrated the timing of your medical procedure to facilitate the theft is something else entirely, something I don't think they've invented a word for yet. But Warren wasn't done digging. As part of building the civil case, he pulled historical financial records connected to my family. He was looking for patterns, prior behavior that would strengthen the argument that Gail's actions weren't impulsive, but habitual. And he found one. 9 years ago, when my father Robert died of a heart attack, Gail served as executor of his estate. The estate was small, some savings, a life insurance policy, and personal property. Among that personal property was my grandmother Beverly's jewelry collection, which Beverly had given to Robert years earlier, with the understanding it would eventually go to me $14,000 worth of pieces, a sapphire ring, a pearl necklace, 2 gold bracelets that Beverly wore every Sunday to church. Those pieces were listed in the estate inventory. They were never distributed. Gail told me at the time that she couldn't find them and that they must have been misplaced during the move. I was 22, grieving my father, and didn't have the energy or knowledge to fight. I let it go. Warren didn't let it go. He pulled the estate records and found that the jewelry was inventoried, valued, and then simply disappeared from the paperwork. No transfer, no sale record, no explanation, just gone. $14,000 of my grandmother's legacy vanished under Gail's watch. That was 9 years ago. And now, here we were again. Same pattern, same target, same woman deciding that what belonged to Madeline Walton actually belonged to whoever Gail Walton decided needed it more. This discovery changed the legal landscape. It established a pattern of habitual financial exploitation. The same victim, the same perpetrator, over nearly a decade. Warren said this would significantly influence how the DA approached criminal charges. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. This was who Gail was. While all of this was happening, my mother continued living in a fantasy. Gail called me twice that week, leaving voicemails about the wedding. The planner had finalized the seating chart. The florist, paid for with my stolen $3,800, was doing white peonies and eucalyptus. And my personal favorite, Gail texted me a photo of bridesmaid fabric swatches with the message, "The planner says blush pink for the bridesmaids. You'll look beautiful, honey." My mother sold my condo while I was having titanium screws drilled into my spine, and now she wanted me to wear blush pink and hold a bouquet at the wedding she'd paid for with the proceeds. At that point, honestly, why not ask me to give a toast too? I'd like to raise a glass to the happy couple, funded entirely by grand theft and forgery. The shrimp cocktail is excellent. It should be at $25,000. I didn't respond to any of it. Not a word. Josie and Warren had both told me the same thing. Silence is the most dangerous weapon when your enemy thinks you're powerless. Gail was counting on me to cry, complain, maybe write an angry text, and then eventually accept it. That's what I'd always done. That was the Maddie she knew. She didn't know the new one. On day 7, I was discharged from the hospital. I couldn't go back to my condo. It was still in legal limbo. So Josie took me to her guest room. She'd already set it up. Extra pillows for my back, a shower bench so I could bathe without twisting my spine, and a small stack of trashy romance novels she said were medically necessary for morale. I could walk with a walker, slowly, painfully, but I could move. Josie's friends, our friends, really, a group of women from Clemson and from the vet clinic, quietly organized a collection for my medical bills. No GoFundMe, no social media drama. Just people who cared, passing the word. They raised $4,300 in 2 days. I sat on Josie's guest bed, reading the Venmo messages. "We've got you, Maddie, and hang in there, girl." And one from my coworker, Lena, that just said, "I hope your mother steps on a Lego every day for the rest of her life." And I cried again, but these were different tears. The next morning, Warren sent one final document, a formal legal notice, not a threat, just information, addressed to Lloyd and Janine Bergstrom, transparents in Spartanburg. The notice stated, clearly and factually, that the funds used to plan their son's wedding were obtained through criminal fraud, that civil and criminal proceedings were underway, and that vendor payments made with stolen money could be subject to legal clawback. 5 days until the wedding, and the Bergstroms were about to learn exactly who their son was marrying into. Lloyd Bergstrom was not a dramatic man. He owned 3 dry cleaning locations across Spartanburg. He drove a Ford F-150 he'd had for 11 years, and his idea of a wild Friday night was watching Clemson football with a bowl of chili. When Warren Ostrowski's legal notice arrived at the Bergstrom home, Lloyd didn't yell. He didn't call Gail. He didn't call Paige. He called his family attorney. The attorney's assessment took about 40 minutes and boiled down to one devastating paragraph. If Trent married Paige while she was connected to an active fraud investigation, any restitution judgments against Paige could potentially attach to marital assets under South Carolina's equitable distribution laws. The wedding wasn't just emotionally risky, it was financially dangerous. The attorney's recommendation was clear. Do not proceed until the criminal matter is fully resolved, which could take a year or longer. Lloyd sat Trent down at the kitchen table and showed him the legal notice. He didn't lecture. He didn't say, "I told you so." He just handed his son the papers and waited. Trent read them twice. Then he asked one question. Did Paige know? Lloyd didn't have the answer, but Trent knew who did. On day 10 after my surgery, Trent Bergstrom called me. It was the first time we'd ever spoken without Paige in the room or on the line. His voice was careful, almost cautious, like a man walking through a house he suspects might be on fire. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't dramatize. I told him facts. The voicemail, the POA signed under sedation, the $195,000, the 3 weeks of planning before my surgery, the forged consent letter, and Paige's text, the one that said, "Don't make this about you," while I was lying in a hospital bed 12 hours after having my spine reconstructed. Trent was quiet for a long time. Then he asked if there was proof Paige knew in advance. I told him about the text exchange between Paige and Gail from 3 weeks before the surgery. What if she doesn't sign? And Gail's response, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." The messages had been flagged during the investigation. They would eventually be used as evidence. Trent thanked me. His voice was flat, not angry, something worse than angry. Disappointed in a way that doesn't recover. He hung up. He didn't confront Paige that night. He drove to his parents' house and stayed there for 2 days. When Paige called, asking where he was, he told her he needed time to think. She asked what there was to think about. He said he'd call her when he was ready. On day 11, Trent called Paige. I don't know exactly what was said because I wasn't there and Trent isn't the type to broadcast private conversations. But Josie heard from Warren, who heard from the Bergstrom's attorney, that Trent told Paige the wedding was postponed indefinitely. He didn't scream. He didn't accuse. He said something along the lines of, he couldn't move forward right now, maybe not ever, and he needed to understand who he was about to marry. Paige's response was immediate and predictable. She called me, not to apologize, not to explain, to blame. She told me I had destroyed her life, that I was jealous, bitter, and selfish, that I had always resented her happiness, and this was my way of punishing her. The same script Gail had written years ago, the family playbook where I'm the villain for refusing to be the doormat. Paige had memorized every line. I let her finish. Then I said what I'd been holding in for 11 days. I told her that she knew exactly what Gail was planning, that she texted Gail 3 weeks before my surgery, asking what would happen if I didn't sign, that she never once called to ask if I survived a 7-hour operation, and that she offered me a bridesmaid spot at a wedding, funded with my stolen home, like it was some kind of consolation prize. Then I hung up. No dramatic monologue, no victory speech, just the quiet click of someone who's done explaining herself to people who never listened anyway. Gail called next, and for the first time, she wasn't cheerful. She was angry, furious, actually. She told me I had ruined Paige's chance at a beautiful life over a piece of real estate. She said I was being vindictive and ungrateful. She said family doesn't do this to family. I didn't argue with her. There's no point arguing with someone who commits a felony and genuinely cannot see the crime. I told Gail that she should talk to a lawyer, a real one, not Harold Fenn, because what was coming next wouldn't be a family conversation. Then I hung up on her too. Gail still didn't know the full picture. She thought this was a family argument, messy, emotional, but something that would eventually blow over the way it always had. She didn't know about the emergency petition. She didn't know about the Lis Pendens. She didn't know about Harold Fenn's cooperation with the sheriff's office. She didn't know about the forged consent letter that elevated her charges to first-degree forgery. She didn't know about the 9-year-old jewelry theft that established a pattern of exploitation. She was about to find out, but not from me, from a detective. 2 days later, a Greenville County Sheriff's investigator knocked on Gail's front door in Simpsonville. He wasn't there to arrest her. Not yet. He was there to formally interview her as the subject of a criminal investigation into forgery, fraud, and financial exploitation of a family member. Gail invited him in because she still believed she could explain her way out of anything. According to the detective's report, which Warren later obtained, Gail spent the first 15 minutes trying to explain that she had done what was best for the family and that Maddie would understand eventually. The detective listened politely and then presented her with a summary of the evidence: the fraudulent POA, the forged consent letter, Harold Fenn's full cooperation, Glenn Sheehan's testimony, the Ring doorbell footage, the bank withdrawal records, and the pre-surgery email chain proving the sale was arranged 3 weeks in advance. Gail stopped talking after that. Day 13. The dates circled on Paige's calendar for 8 months. The Westin Poinsett Ballroom downtown, reserved and decorated in Paige's mind 1,000 times over. The raw bar with imported oysters, the string quartet, the designer dress, the Santorini honeymoon. None of it happened. There was no dramatic scene. No empty ballroom moment. The Westin booked a corporate event in the space that day. Some insurance company's regional meeting. The caterer served a different client. The wedding planner, Renata, sent Gail an invoice for the cancellation fee and moved on to her next bride. Paige spent the day in her childhood bedroom in Gail's house. Trent spent it at his parents' place in Spartanburg, watching college basketball with his dad. Gail sat alone in her kitchen, looking at a stack of legal documents she was just beginning to understand. And I sat in Josie's guest room, eating takeout from a Thai place on Augusta Road, watching a nature documentary about octopuses. Did you know octopuses have 3 hearts? That felt oddly relevant. Some creatures are just built to survive things that should break them. The wedding was gone, but the story wasn't over, because the civil case, the scalpel, had done its job. Now it was time for the slow wait. If this story has meant something to you, I'd love it if you hit subscribe and leave a like. It's a small thing, but it truly keeps this channel going, and I'm grateful for every single one of you. 4 weeks after my surgery, the Greenville County Court officially voided the property sale. Every document Harold Fenn had notarized, every signature Gail had placed using the fraudulent power of attorney, every paper in that closing file, all of it declared null and void. My name was restored on the deed. My condo was mine again. The title insurance company covered Glenn Sheehan's immediate losses while the court processed the full restitution order against Gail. Glenn got his money back. He was the one innocent person in this entire mess who'd been dragged in by my mother's lies, and he deserved to come out whole. Last I heard, he bought a duplex in West Columbia and was doing fine. 6 weeks after surgery, I walked back into my condo for the first time, slowly, with my walker. It took me about 4 minutes to get from Josie's car to my front door, and every step sent a dull ache radiating through my lower back. But I made it. Donna Litvak was waiting in the hallway with a vase of sunflowers so big it looked like she'd raided an entire farmer's market. She'd been checking on the place while I was gone, watering my one surviving houseplant, picking up the mail, making sure the pipes didn't freeze during that weird cold snap Greenville had in late October. I stepped inside. Everything was exactly where I'd left it. My lavender candle still sat on the kitchen counter. My coffee mug was still in the drying rack. The throw blanket was still folded on the couch. Nobody had packed my things. Nobody had moved anything, because I never sold my home. My mother did, and the law brought it back. I stood in my kitchen, the one with the countertops I'd picked out myself, the backsplash I'd installed on a Saturday with Josie and a YouTube tutorial and a bottle of cheap wine, and I cried. Not the sideways hospital tears, real ones. The kind that come from getting back something you were sure was gone forever. But the criminal case was still moving, slowly, heavily, and with the kind of inevitability that Gail Walton never planned for. Harold Fenn was the first to fall, charged with notary fraud. His notary commission was revoked permanently by the state. 40 years of professional reputation, gone because he took $2,200 to skip every safeguard that existed to protect people like me. He faced a $15,000 fine and civil liability to Glenn Sheehan. Harold's wife, according to Donna's Neighborhood Intelligence Network, could barely look at him. I can't say I felt sorry for him, but I didn't celebrate either. He was a lazy man who made a greedy choice, and he paid for it. That's just math. Then came Gail. My mother was formally charged on a Tuesday morning, roughly 2.5 months after the surgery. Felony forgery in the first degree. Financial exploitation of a family member. 2 charges that carry a combined maximum of 15 years in South Carolina. A Greenville County Sheriff's deputy arrived at her home in Simpsonville at 7:45 a.m. She was arrested, transported to the detention center, booked, fingerprinted, and photographed. Her mugshot was taken under the same fluorescent lights that photograph everyone equally, the scared, the dangerous, the foolish, and the ones who still don't think they did anything wrong. Gail was released on bail the same day, but the damage was done. Her name was in the system, her fingerprints were in the database, and her face was in a file that would follow her for the rest of her life. Gail hired an attorney, a cheap one, because she'd spent most of the stolen money on imported oysters and eucalyptus centerpieces. Her attorney reviewed the evidence and delivered the kind of news that no amount of self-justification can soften. The case was overwhelming. The fraudulent POA, the forged consent letter, the one Gail had created as extra proof that became the single most incriminating document in the file. Harold Fenn's full cooperation, Glenn Sheehan's testimony and email records, Donna Litvak's time-stamped ring footage, the 9-year pattern of financial exploitation going back to the disappeared jewelry, the pre-surgery timeline proving the entire scheme was planned weeks in advance. Gail's attorney recommended a plea deal. Fighting this in trial would be expensive, public, and almost certainly result in a harsher sentence. The plea: guilty to felony forgery and financial exploitation, 3 years in state prison, 5 years of supervised probation after release, full restitution to Glenn Sheehan, permanent felony record, meaning Gail could never again serve as executor of an estate, trustee of a trust, agent under a power of attorney, or work in any school, childcare, or fiduciary capacity. A court-ordered restraining order prohibiting any contact with me. And the restitution. The court ordered the sale of Gail's house in Simpsonville, the family home, the house where she'd raised Paige and me. The house she'd controlled like her personal kingdom for 20 years. It sold for $187,000. The proceeds went to Glenn Sheehan's restitution. The woman who sold her daughter's home to fund a wedding lost her own home to pay for the consequences. Beverly would have called that poetic. I just called it overdue. Then the investigation reached Paige. Around month 4, the forensic review of Gail's phone records, standard procedure in fraud cases, uncovered the text exchange between Paige and Gail from 3 weeks before my surgery. Paige's message: "What if she doesn't sign?" Gail's response: "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." 7 words from Paige. 7 words that proved she knew about the plan before it happened, asked about its potential failure, and continued to participate after receiving assurance it would proceed. The DA added Paige as a co-defendant, conspiracy to commit fraud. Paige received her charges by mail. Not a knock on the door, not handcuffs, just a plain envelope from the Greenville County Solicitor's Office sitting in her mailbox on a Thursday afternoon. I've often thought about that moment. Paige checking the mail, maybe expecting a catalog or a credit card offer, and pulling out the document that changed her life. No fanfare, just paper, her plea deal. 18 months of probation, 200 hours of community service, and a criminal record that would show up on every background check for the rest of her life. She was 27 years old with a felony conspiracy charge attached to her name. Trent Bergstrom formally ended the engagement around month 5. He didn't call Paige to do it. His attorney sent a letter. The ring was returned in the same envelope. No conversation, no closure, no final fight. He simply removed himself from her life the way you remove your name from a mailing list, quietly, completely, and without looking back. I heard later, through the Greenville grapevine that Donna Litvak monitors like a hawk, that Trent eventually started dating a pharmacist from Travelers Rest, who coached girls softball on weekends. Good for him. He wasn't the villain. He was just a decent man who almost married the wrong family. Paige lost everything. The fiancé, the wedding, The dress that still hung in plastic in a closet nobody opened. The Santorini honeymoon that existed only in a browser history. Her mother was going to prison. The family home, the only home she'd ever known, was sold by court order. Paige moved into a one-bedroom apartment off Woodruff Road with a roommate she found on a housing app. She got a job as a hostess at a chain restaurant. She was 27, working for tips, splitting rent, and carrying a criminal record. The golden child had finally learned that gold doesn't protect you when you've helped someone steal it. As for me, I healed. Slowly. My spine got stronger every week. I walked without the walker by week 10. I went back to Palmetto Animal Hospital part-time after 8 weeks, then full-time by month 4. The first dog I treated when I came back was a 12-year-old beagle named Potato, who needed his teeth cleaned. Potato didn't care about my legal drama. He just wanted the treat I keep in my scrub pocket. Honestly, that was the best welcome back I could have asked for. I set up an automatic transfer, $50 per paycheck into a new savings account at a different bank. One name on the account, mine. No power of attorney for anyone ever again. I also got a proper will drafted by Warren Ostrowski, naming Josie Callahan as my executor, because here's something I learned the hard way, and I want to say it plainly in case it helps someone listening. Protect your assets in writing. Every document, every account, every piece of property. Make sure the only people with access are people who've earned your trust through actions, not just blood. Family is beautiful when it's honest, but a signature on the wrong document can cost you everything you have. Josie got promoted to senior paralegal after Warren told the partners how she'd handled my case from day one. Donna Litvak still checks her Ring camera 14 times a day, and I still bring her banana bread every second Sunday. She's the neighbor everyone deserves and almost nobody gets. I think about my grandmother Beverly sometimes, standing in this kitchen that she owned for 19 years before she left it to me. She saw what was coming. She wrote her will the way she did because she knew that Gail would do exactly this if given the chance. Beverly tried to protect me from beyond the grave. And in the end, she was right. The condo came back. It always belonged here. It always belonged to me. The people who call you selfish for having boundaries are almost always the ones who profit from you having none. And the most powerful thing you'll ever do is stop letting them. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of this one. If you want more stories like this, there's one waiting on your screen right now, and I promise it's just as good. Click it and I'll see you there in just a second.